Hello, everyone. I am so glad that you all are able to join us today. My name is Kinsley. I am going to just give everybody a minute to get logged in and join us. While we give everyone just a minute to get settled in, I'm going to drop in the chat where I am joining you from. So I'm actually located in the South Georgia area near Savannah. If any of you are familiar with that, I'm a little south of Atlanta. So feel free to drop in the chat just where you're joining from. I think it's always fun to see the different time zones and locations that are being represented. And so while we wait for some more people to join and for everyone to get logged in, I will just do a brief introduction of myself and of HiCounselor so you know what we're all about, and then we'll turn it over to the real reason that you all are here. So my name is Kinsley, and I am a candidate success manager at HiCounselor, and so I get the opportunity to work with our candidates as soon as they join the program, and it's really fun and exciting. We are a career accelerator, and so we help job seekers land their dream job through a 4-week training period, and we cover super important topics that are typically asked in or covered in interviews. And so you go through this training program and you are attending behavioral, HR, and technical interview prep sessions. We also have a team that will review your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and then you get to attend sessions on networking, on salary negotiation. We have one-on-ones with instructors and mock interview prep. So all the things that you need to become really confident and comfortable when starting those interviews. We also have automated email networking and an automated job application tool for candidates. So once you make it through that initial 4-week training period, then you move into that automatic email networking and automatic job application tool, and then also referrals. And then I think one of the coolest features that we have are the upskilling opportunities. We've got some projects that you can work on. We also have live projects that you can join through our LinkedIn page. So all just really great opportunities for you to just enhance your skills and prep for those interviews. I'm going to be sharing some links with you at the end of the session, and one of those will include our most recent live project that you can sign up for. So definitely be on the lookout for that. We support candidates in a couple different tracks: software engineering, data science, and sales related roles. And I know that was a super quick overview, but we do host info sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So that means we have a session this evening. It is Thursday, right? All the days start to run together. And so would love to see you there. You can sign up at the link that I'm going to drop at the end of today's webinar. Or you can go to HiCounselor.com for more information. Our next cohort begins on July 24th. So you've got a little bit of time to join an info session and take a look at that application. So yeah, but like I said, as you all know, our main focus here today is learning from Carter about practical daily tips for software engineers. And so I'm so excited to be able to introduce Carter. He's a software development engineer at Amazon Web Services in the US. Prior to joining Amazon, he worked as a senior software engineer at Grubhub and gained over 3 years of experience in Disney parks, experiences, and products. During his tenure, Carter successfully developed and managed over 40 reusable web components using the Angular and Polymer frameworks. He's also played a key role in deploying cloud-based web services, conducting interviews, and providing mentorship, and contributing to project direction. He holds a bachelor's degree in science from Brigham Young University, and he's currently pursuing a master's degree in computer science from Georgia Institute of Technology in Georgia. So I love that. I love that. All right. So Carter, thank you so much for joining us. So happy to have you here.
Well, great. It's great to be here and great to see. It looks like we got a good crowd joining us from all over the country and even outside the country. So welcome.
I know, that's awesome. I love seeing all of the different time zones and locations represented. So thank you all for sharing. It's so great to have you all. It's great to have Carter. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and we'll get started. Okay.
Sounds great. Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. Like Kinsley mentioned, my name's Carter, a professional software engineer. We'll go through a bit of my background in these upcoming slides. If you want to go ahead and move us ahead, Kinsley. So yeah, just a bit about me. Kinsley already mentioned a bit about this, but if we go to the next slide, we'll see. So bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University. I'm currently located in Utah. I actually see we have someone from Salt Lake City, so good to see a fellow Utahn here. And I am currently pursuing my master's degree in computer science through Georgia Tech. They have a great online program, which has just been a real treat to go through. So a big fan of Georgia Tech and highly recommend that to anyone who's considering post-bachelor's education. If we go ahead, we can see, like Kinsley mentioned, I've been privileged to work at some companies you've probably heard of. Currently employed at AWS right now. I joined them last year. I've been there for a bit over a year now. And previously, I had the chance to work at Grubhub and Disney. All excellent experiences, different and very different from each other, but great places to be software engineers. Can't recommend each company highly enough. Just as while I'm thinking about it, obviously it goes without saying here that I'm speaking as Carter Morgan, professional software engineer. None of this advice is sanctioned by any of the companies I work for or have worked for. I'm sure you already knew that, but it's always good to have a bit of a disclaimer. What I wanted to talk about today is just some practical daily tips for software engineers. Now, a lot of this advice might seem common sense, and it probably is, right? The reason I've selected some of these tips is because these are things that either I didn't know to do when I started out, or even amongst my colleagues that I don't see them doing. And honestly, most of the advice is just stuff I saw my colleagues doing, thought it was good, and started implementing it in my own life. So in this advice today, I've tried hard to keep this to real practical, concrete actions, right? I'm staying away from platitudes like be curious or, take an interest in your coworkers or things like that. These are real practical things you can do every day. And this is not a guarantee to being a successful software engineer, right? Or to making the big bucks or anything like that. But these are things that I have found very helpful in my career. And I'll say, as we go throughout this, we'll have some time at about the halfway point for some Q&A. But also, as you post stuff in the chat, please feel free to post any questions you might have. We often stop in the middle to answer them, even stop, in the middle of one of the tips to answer them. And that's one of the big benefits of doing a live stream, right? And this not being static video, right? So please feel free to interact. I try to engage with our viewers as much as I possibly can. So with all that said, let's move on to tip number 1. So this one's pretty simple, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do it, which is just, I highly encourage you to keep notes, right? You can keep notes in whatever format works best for you. Personally, we use a Salesforce product called Quip, but it's basically just a Google Doc, right? I have a Google Doc at work. Every day I just do in big bold letters the start of the day, or just the date, and then I just keep notes for what's happening on that day, right? So you might ask kind of, well, what kind of notes do you keep? And the answer is really anything that would be helpful in your job, right? I often will include in there helpful links to maybe dashboards or internal tooling or something that I may only need to access once every 6 months, but I'll just include a quick little description of what it is and include the link there, right? Makes it a lot easier to look it up next time, right? I just do a Control F in my note stock and find it, right? I try to keep running notes if I'm debugging something, right? I almost kind of keep like I'm messaging myself over Slack, right? I try to keep notes of what is working, what isn't working. I try to keep notes of output, right? Like if I was debugging an issue the other day where when moving at AWS, I work in a component called Private Link, and kind of our big product there is it's a VPC endpoint. It allows you to have secure communication between your VPC and an Amazon service, right? And so I was trying to convert a VPC endpoint from IPv4 to dual stack, which is IPv4 and IPv6. And I just had lots and lots of logs, right, about what certain internal data structures looked like during that conversion process. And so rather than just trying to remember that, I would just copy and paste, the printed out log and say, okay, this is an example of when the conversion was successful. This is an example of when it wasn't, and just made it easy to kind of keep an aggregate of all of those things, right? And so again, how you keep notes and what that exactly that's going to look like, that's up to you, right? Some people keep them on their phones, some people keep them like Microsoft OneNote or something like that. I don't really care, right? But the important thing is just to keep notes. And I would encourage you to keep more notes than you think you need to keep, right? Because you'd be surprised how often you'll go back and reference those things. If every time I kind of, in my personal life, I'm a daily journaler, right? And I've just come to the conclusion that about 90% of my journal entries are going to be very boring and not worth reading in the future. But because I journal every day, the 10% that actually are worth interesting happen. If I only journaled every time I thought something was worth journaling, I would never journal. It's kind of the same way with notes, right? Don't just keep notes in important meetings or presentations or things like that. Keep notes on everything, and you'd be surprised how much useful information you're going to pick up there. So let's move on to point number 2. This is, I'm a big fan of this one. Before you say, I don't know, look up the answer, right? I should note that I am a full remote employee. I go to Seattle occasionally to meet with the team. But in general, a lot of this advice is for those who are maybe fully remote or those who are doing hybrid days or things like that. I'm not saying that this advice can't apply to being in person, but this is sort of what colors my thinking. One of the things I really like about being full remote, one of the things I think is really beneficial to companies that embrace a full remote culture, is that ability that when someone, there are a lot of questions that people ask me, right? That if I were in person, the very first thing I'd have to say is, I don't know. I don't know about that, right? But if they Slack me, oftentimes that 2 or 3 minutes before, where it's acceptable to not respond, right, is all the time I need to look it up, right? For example, at Amazon, there's like 1 million acronyms, right? And we actually have a wiki full of the acronyms, right? And, someone will often ask me about an acronym, right? And or ask me a question involving an acronym or two, and instead of just immediately responding, say, I don't know what that means, I take 1 minute to go to that wiki and I look it up and I know what they're talking about, right? Sometimes people will ask me questions about the implementation of our system and how that works, right? And again, before responding, I don't know, usually I have to take a minute or two to look it up in our docs and respond, right? If you do have to answer, I don't know, right? Either you're in person or you have to respond super quick for some reason. It's usually great to say, I'm not sure. Let me look it up real quick, or give me a minute. I'm going to try to find out, right? But just communicating that willingness to look up knowledge and to be self-sufficient is really helpful. So I'd encourage you to build up this muscle that just before you say, I don't know, especially if it's over Slack or something like that, take 2 minutes and try to look up the answer. You'd be surprised how many times you can find it. And then if you don't have it after that, it's still okay to say, I don't know. I'm not saying don't say, I don't know. I actually feel like I've gotten fairly far in my career by being fairly honest about what I do know and what I don't know. I feel like it makes people able to trust me. But there's always, there's advantages in just in taking that 2 minutes to look something up before you answer. So this is another one. You can keep this in your notes or wherever, but I like to, at the very beginning of the day, I like to sit down and just write down what would make today a successful day, right? Usually I have a list of tasks that need to be accomplished, maybe some people I need to reach out to, anything like that, right? But in particular, especially if you're working at on a team or at a company with sort of high demands, or it's a high performance place, right? It's kind of possible to always have things that need to be done, right? To never really finish your work, right? And that's going to just stress you out during the workday. It's going to stress you out in the evening when you sign off of work. I find it really helpful to write down just, okay, if I get these 5 things done today, then today was successful. And it helps me to focus my efforts. It helps me to know what the most important thing is. And it helps me to just, again, to be happy and satisfied and confident with myself at the end of the day. So just having that idea of what the most important thing to do today is, I found to be very, very helpful. And again, it's important, I think, to write it down, right? Don't just keep it in your head. It's easy to shift around in your head, but if you can write it down at the beginning of the day, focus on it, keep it your North Star throughout the day. I think that'll set you up for a pretty successful day and a pretty successful career. So move, and great. This is another one. This is called, I call it 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off. I think what it's actually called is the Pomodoro technique, if you're not familiar with that. This is for if there are just days where you really just don't want to work, right? And believe me, I've been there. I think we've all been there, right? And so the question is, it's easy just to sort of goof off, spend your time on Twitter or Reddit or whatever. And how do you motivate yourself to get started? Well, what I tell myself, right, is that I can do anything for 15 minutes, right? I could stand on my head for 15 minutes, right? And so what I'll do is I tell myself, I say, you don't have to work the rest of the day. You just have to work for these next 15 minutes. And after those 15 minutes, you get a 5-minute break. And I'm pretty strict with myself about giving myself that 5-minute break, trusting myself that after that 15 minutes, I'm going to get that 5-minute reward, right? Because again, you can do anything for 15 minutes. And what I've found is in doing that is, one, if there's a big, long stretch of things I just really don't want to do, and I just kind of have to give myself that 15 minutes or do it in 15-minute chunks, this is the way to get through it, right? And also what I found is sometimes I'll give myself the 15 minutes, I'll do the 5 minutes off, I'll give myself another 15 minutes, but then I don't need it anymore, because really that 15 minutes was all I needed to get started, right? And now that I'm actually involved, then the assignment is interesting, right? I get really into the code I'm writing or the stuff I'm debugging or the people I'm talking with. And so usually all that 15 minutes, I just need that to get started, and then I can go throughout the rest of the day, right? As far as what you do during your 5 minutes off, that's your choice, right? I mean, it's your break, right? I do recommend getting up and leaving the computer, right? Not just, switching to a different tab or just going on your phone and looking at Twitter or whatever. I do find it's really helpful to stand up, walk around. If you're working from home, that's you use your bathroom break, you get a drink of water, right? Maybe even step outside for a few minutes. If you're, I guess it's very similar. If you're in the office, get up, stretch your legs, go take a bathroom break, get a drink of water, go outside, walk around for a bit. But I find that this is a good balance, right? The 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off, right? You're still working 3 times as much as you're resting, right? Don't abuse the Pomodoro technique and flip it 5 minutes on, 15 minutes off. I've seen people do that. That one's not as effective. But I highly encourage you, if you're having trouble getting started with something, just tell yourself you just got to do it for 15 minutes, and you'd be surprised how many subsequent 15 minutes you can do in a workday. All right, this is another one. This is a habit I actually picked up from one of my bosses that I really respect, which is to acknowledge every message you receive. I'm talking Slack here, not necessarily an email, within 5 minutes, right? What does it mean to acknowledge everything within 5 minutes? That does not mean you have the answer in 5 minutes, right? It doesn't even necessarily mean that you respond in 5 minutes. But again, this is something I really appreciate with my boss. He'll almost always respond with like the little eyeball emoji, right? Just to show that he's looking at it, right? And the trick is he then does follow up relatively quickly, usually within the day, right? But I found this to be enormously helpful in letting people know that you're conscientious, that you're responsive, that you're aware of what they need, and then just and working through your messages. Obviously, this can't always happen. I recently been on call at work, and I have tons and tons of people messaging me, right? Asking questions about our system and asking for help and things like that. Not possible to acknowledge everything within 5 minutes, but especially amongst the people you're closest to and your teammates and your coworkers, showing that you're responding to things and that you're acknowledging them quickly can really be a big deal in increasing your teammates' trust in you, them feeling like they can reach out to you more, and them feeling like you're, just generally on top of things. So at this point, we're about halfway through. I just want to, Kinsley, do we want to take this time, see if there are any questions from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, do you have any, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, just any kind of general questions for Carter. I love what you were saying, Carter, about putting pen to paper. I think there's something really empowering about writing it down, and it almost makes, you're like you're holding yourself accountable to that when you write it down, because it can be, like you said, in your brain, and then the next thing you know, you've moved on to something totally different. But there's something really powerful about looking down and saying, okay, I wrote down my intentions. Here they are. And that's staring back at you in the face. It's like, okay, I need to make this happen.
No, I agree, right? There's that's a big part of this field is about sort of accountability to oneself, right? It's one thing I really like about being a software engineer. I worked a lot of different jobs when I was younger, particularly in college, right? I delivered pizza. I worked at a Tex-Mex place, grilling steaks and washing dishes. I drove for Uber. I sold football tickets over the phone. I worked at a call center, right? All sorts of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I graduated and became as a software engineer, one of the things I really appreciated about it was the degree of autonomy we have over our work, right? Like I couldn't really just take a break from grilling the steaks at Costa Vida, right? People needed steaks, and I couldn't decide how many steaks I wanted to grill or how long I wanted to grill them for, or anything like that, right? And then I became a software engineer and sort of moved into my professional jobs. I just remember my very first professional job, and I'd come off one of those rough, sort of more menial jobs, and the very first thing I had to do was install Android Studio on my computer. It said it was going to take 30 minutes. I was like, well, what do I do now? My coworker was like, I don't know, wait for it to install, right? And I was shocked that that constituted work. But then as the time went on, again, how I spent my day was largely up to me. And so it's a field of work that requires a lot of self-discipline, particularly if you are working remotely, right? There's not someone breathing over your shoulder, making sure you get something done. And I know that's something I had to adjust to when COVID started way back when. And so that's these tips here that's part of what all of this is. It's building up that self-discipline, right, to be a successful software engineer.
Right. And so many times too, the thing that's standing in the way of that success is our own self.
Oh, yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of these do address that, and just, again, practical things that you can do day in and day out, to kind of break that barrier and get to the next level.
At Amazon, one thing we really believe is in the idea of mechanisms, right? Which is if there's an area where we're slacking in, or maybe something's gone wrong or something like that, we can't just say to ourselves like, well, we'll be better next time, right? We say, what is the concrete action we're going to implement that is going to prevent this from happening, or that's going to move us to a better performance, right? And so that's sort of what I've been trying to focus on here, right? Is anyone can show up and say, the way to be a software engineer is to have good self-discipline, right? But what does that mean? How does one develop it, right? And this is not a comprehensive list on how to develop all of that, but they are some habits that, you don't need to wonder, how do I write down what makes a successful day, right? Like that's pretty self-explanatory, right? And I encourage you, as you go throughout your careers, think about how you can structure your career and your success in those concrete actions, right? Because we really are just the sum of our habits, right? And the actions we do day in, day out.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. We do have one viewer who wrote in and is just asking, with the current economic scenario and the market as it is now, with companies that are freezing their hiring, any suggestions or tips or advice on still landing a job?
Oh, that's a great question on here, and I just want to flag to everyone, right, that one of the benefits of doing these streaming things, there really are no bad questions as long as they relate to the world of software engineering. So if you don't have any questions specifically about this presentation, but have a more general question like Ron here, hiring, getting hired, what it's like to be a software engineer, throw them in the chat, right? And we're happy to answer them. That's kind of what we're all about here at HiCounselor. So first off, Ron here, I just like to say I cannot speak to the hiring climate in India. I've never been to India. I don't know a lot about India. What I do think is that it's probably not super different. I know a lot of the companies in the United States also operate in India, right? I know that India is not immune to the economic climate facing kind of the entire world right now. So this advice I'm going to give is mostly for America, but I am sure that it applies to India very well. So the one thing I'd say is not all companies are freezing their hiring. In fact, and this is just Carter Morgan speaking, not backed by anyone, any business or economic institution or anything like that, right? But from what I have seen, and I am seeing that the market is picking up a little bit. I'm seeing that companies are starting to hire a little more, right? For the longest time, I had no recruiters in my inbox. The past 2 weeks, I've had maybe 10. You know, back in the summer of 2022, I probably had 50 a week in my inbox. And so it has maybe gone down a little bit, but I'm seeing things start to pick up. So I don't think that all companies are freezing their hiring, right? Now, what I have found, especially amongst people who are really motivated about their career and are looking at HiCounselor, right, is people tend to be very, very interested in getting into those big top tech companies right at the very beginning, right? Your Amazons, your Facebooks, your Apples, right? The FANG companies, as they're called, right? I think that's a great goal, right? I work at a FANG company, and there's a lot of great things about working there. But a lot of them, their hiring is a little frozen. And so if you have set for yourself kind of a FANG or bust, goal right at the beginning of your career, right at the stage in your career, that might be a little harder to achieve at this point. A lot of the things are hiring more than they were 6 months ago, so you're in a good spot, right? But it might not happen. What I always tell people, though, is that I work at Amazon right now, and out of all my coworkers, and I am not the smartest of my coworkers, right? Many of my coworkers are much smarter than me, and that's one thing I love about working at Amazon is how smart all the engineers are, right? But out of all my coworkers, generally, and I'd say almost fairly comfortably, I have by far the most sort of pedigreed resume, right? Because I have worked for companies that you guys have heard of. You guys know what Grubhub is. You know what Disney is, right? One of my favorite coworkers, I work with him all the time, super smart guy. Before he joined Amazon, he worked for like a 10-person company that dealt with like when people die, dispersing their data to like the proper insurance companies, right? Like that's what he worked at before Amazon. But he's a super smart guy. He passed the Amazon hiring bar just like I did. Now we work together at Amazon, right? And so if you don't wind up at maybe your dream company right at the beginning, it's a long career, guys, right? If you're starting out when you're young, you've probably got 40 good years ahead of you, right? To work at these companies you want. And so we here at HiCounselor are committed to getting you the best possible job we can get you at the best possible company we can get you. It might not be your dream company right away, but you're not doomed if you start out maybe at a place where you don't want to be, right? I've had points in my career where I've been at places I don't want to be, and I've come out just fine. So that's what I'm saying. I reject the idea that all companies are freezing their hiring. Lots of companies are freezing their hiring. Lots of amazing companies that you might not have even considered if maybe some of the bigger guys were hiring are hiring. And so, yes, absolutely, you can still get a job. I have no doubt about qualified candidates being able to get a job. And if you're here looking at how to accelerate your career with HiCounselor, my guess is you already are, a qualified candidate, right? You're probably not resting on your laurels. You maybe just need a little extra boost to get you going, and that's what we're all about here at HiCounselor. Rupesh asks if I'm the founder of JP Morgan. No, I am not. If I were the founder of JP Morgan, I would probably.
We would miss you. We would miss you a lot. Oh man, we do have John who says, "Hey Carter, thank you for the tips. In your journey as a software engineer, what do you think changed, or things you noticed change in your knowledge, skills, etc., as you climb the ranks?"
Well, that's a great question, Don. Yeah. And I really like that you're thinking kind of ahead in the future. As far as what the most that's changed, it is the breadth of knowledge, right? When I first started, I remember one of my very first jobs at Disney was to take an Angular component, which I think had been, it was an Angular component. It was like the very first version of Angular, and we were going to migrate it, basically update it to like whatever the current version of Angular was at the time. I had absolutely no idea how to do any of that. I'd never seen anything about Angular, right? And it freaked me out. And I didn't even know how to get the component to run, right? And just that was a huge challenge for me right at the very beginning, was even just getting a singular web component to run locally just on my browser, right? And so as far as scope, my breadth was very, very small, right? As I've gotten more senior in my career, I have found the breadth of my knowledge has increased far more than the depth of my knowledge, right? Like I wish I was a Java whiz, right? I wish I just understood everything about it forwards and backwards, but I don't. Like I know enough to be effective, right? And I know enough how to set up a project and to work within a project, right? But I can't tell you all the ins and outs of Java, right? Some people can, right? Side note, that was when going from Disney to Amazon, that was one of the biggest shocks to me is when I worked at Disney, our welcome training video was done by Mark Hamill. It was Luke Skywalker. I'm like, wow, this is really cool because like I'm at Disney now. When I was at Amazon, our welcome training video was done by the inventor of Java, right? And so I was like, oh wow, this is like a real deal tech company here. So both very cool in different ways. I never got to do a backstage tour of the Haunted Mansion at Amazon, but I got to do that at Disney. Anyhow, I digress. I guess what I'm saying is that my depth of any particular field has not gotten as deep as maybe I'd like it to. It's my breadth of knowledge that has increased, right? Instead of just being a struggle just to get one local Angular component right, I now know how to use that Angular component in an Angular project. I know how to run that locally. I know how to get it to communicate with our Node.js backend, which I also know how to edit and update, right? I know how both of those things are deployed, right? I know how they go from running locally to up in the cloud and running, in production for everyone, right? I know the dependencies of those services, right? I know how to use S3 and DynamoDB, right? I know how to use even some more particular tool, like setting up this in particular, but like EC2 instances, setting up those in a VPC with different subnets, right? I know I work for Private Link. I know a lot about VPC endpoints at this point and how to use them and what to do. Things like Lambda, serverless architecture, API gateway, DNS names, Route 53, right? All these sort of different components, right? Do I know a particularly deep amount about any of these components? I know enough. I know enough to be effective, right? But I would not call myself like a DynamoDB expert, right? But I know how all of these components work in orchestration with each other to make a successful production-ready service for customers to use, right? And so I'd say, yeah, that's just sort of what I think has changed the most for me as I've sort of climbed the ranks. Is as I imagine as I go further in my career, because I'm about 6 years into my career. Like I said, I got 40 years, 35 good years ahead of me, right? I imagine that the depth is going to start kicking in from here on out. But especially in that first 5 years or so, 6 years, that's what I encourage you to be able to do, is really focus on getting that breadth and understanding, right, what it takes to get a project from your computer to accessible for everyone in the world, right? And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see from software engineers starting out. They say, well, I just want to write the code. I don't want to do like DevOps, right? I don't want to do CI/CD or anything like that. I want someone else to take care of that for you. It's all software engineering, folks, right? It's why personally, I really dislike the term like coder or programmer, right? Because like coding and programming is fairly easy compared to everything else. What we are engineers, right? Our job is to, take abstract ideas and to turn them into concrete realities and to solve them, all the different problems along the way. And once you start thinking of yourself as an engineer, right, and not like a Java coder, then you just start asking yourself what the best tool for the job is, right? And that is where that sort of engineering brain kicks in. So that's again, to repeat one last time, I think develop that breadth of knowledge so you can have in your engineering tool bag all those different possible solutions to your problem, and then employ those solutions in the way that makes the most sense for any given problem, right?
Perfect. Great. Okay, well, we will jump back into the rest of the tips that you have for us today, and then we will conclude with a last round of Q&A. So keep your questions coming. If you think of anything, go ahead and drop it in the chat so you don't forget. But with that, I will leave you back to it, okay?
Great. Let's move on to the next slide. And again, I just want to thank Ron here and Don, Rupesh. It's a funny joke. Thank you for your joke. But Ron here and Don, just if anyone has questions that are even more a little general, like they've asked, please go ahead and ask. Again, here at HiCounselor, we're all about helping you to achieve that next level of your career, right? And we try to have a very tailored approach to you. And so don't worry if your question maybe seems a little off topic while we're discussing. That's kind of what we're here for. So let's move on to point 6. Yeah. So this is a simple one, right? But when you have to do your code reviews, tag specific people to review them, either in the channel or message them separately. I can't tell you how many code reviews I've seen sort of wither on the vine because people just say, "Hey, anyone, can someone review this, please?" Right? But it's kind of like, but no one gets to it, right? It's kind of like, I was a Boy Scout when I was younger, proud Eagle Scout. And I had to do lots of first aid training, right? One of the very first things they taught us in first aid training when you're responding to someone in a public situation, someone who needs real professional help, right? Like an ambulance or something, is you don't shout, someone call 911. You find someone, you signal out someone specifically in the crowd or whatever, and you say, you call 911. Because it's the bystander effect, right? If you say someone call 911, everyone figures that someone is someone else, right? The same thing, not just for your code reviews, but anything in particular, right? If I really encourage you to reach out to specific members of your team and ask for help, because that will often get you help quicker. That'll show that you're the kind of person to take initiative. I encourage you to rotate amongst your team members, right? Don't just always ask the same person over and over again. That can get annoying, right? But if people aren't responding to a general request for help or for your code reviews or anything like that, do a specific one, right? And that's as a larger point, that's something in this industry, right, that I think people don't get, is they think, oh, this great job is great for me because I'm just the kind of person who just wants to sit at my desk and not talk to anyone ever, right? I mean, this job is better for you in that regard than being like a salesman, like a concierge or something like that, where your whole job is talking to people. But a big part of this job is effective communication, effective collaboration, reaching out to people and working together. That is part of your job. Too many engineers think that their job is just to produce code. Your job is to work effectively as a team to produce a product that people use, right? A lot of that is going to be writing code, right? But a lot of that is going to be effective collaboration and communication, right? And so one of the ways you can more effectively collaborate and communicate is by being specific in who you target with your questions and your requests for help. So I encourage you, be specific. All right, this is another one. It sort of goes with notes. I highly recommend keeping a to-do list and updating it. This also bleeds over into that idea of writing down what's going to be a successful day, right? You're going to have all sorts of people asking you for things, right? There's going to be all sorts of tasks that you're working on. And this is especially as you get more senior, going to increase, right? It's really easy to lose track of all of that. I really encourage you just to keep a to-do list. Bullet points, again, keep it in Google Doc, keep it on your reminders app, keep it wherever makes the most sense for you, right? I used to do on my reminders app. I now keep it as a checklist in my Google Doc. And I really like that because I make notes below each item, right? So instead of just saying like, oh, I need to fix this bug, right? Because then if it's a really big, complicated bug, it might just sit on your to-do list for a long time. You get a little demoralized because it's not going. But I'll just add notes under it. I'll be like, okay, reached out to so-and-so for help. And then when that's done, I cross it out. And then I say, okay, implemented this strategy. And then when that's done, I cross it out, right? And then I just kind of keep a list of where I'm at with that item. This really helps me to organize my thoughts, helps things to not get lost by the wayside, and just helps me kind of like what Kinsley was talking about. You hold yourself accountable to what you have to do and what you have to not do in any given day. All right. This is another thing. You'll notice that we've been talking a lot about writing, right? Part of that is because we're just, it's in this field, we are coding on our computers all day, every day. And so, of course, we're going to be writing something down. This is for when you're ending the day, right? I highly encourage writing down how you're going to start the next day, right? That can really help you, put you in a good mental state for getting, for hitting the ground running the next day. If every day when you log in, you kind of say, okay, now let me go see what I have to do, right? You might drag your feet a little bit. You might not start as quickly as you might like to. And you might spend the previous night stressed out, right? And worried about the day to come. I often will write down just exactly how I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes of the day, right? I say I need to send a message to so-and-so, and then I need to get, this project up and running and ready for debugging, right? And I usually find that that's just enough of a kick in the pants and a little bit of direction to hit the ground running the next day. So I found this to be very helpful in my career. I think this is the last one. This is, out of all of the pieces of advice, maybe the least concrete, but like we talked about before, your job is not just to produce code, it's to work effectively as a team to produce a usable product that makes money for someone, right? And so, that those relationships you form with your coworkers and with your team are going to be vital. So I really recommend just checking in with your coworkers, right? This is much easier if you're in person, right? If you're in person, when you walk into the beginning of the day, just say, hey, so-and-so, how's it going? If someone has mentioned anything particular they were looking forward to, maybe say on Friday, they say, oh, I'm going camping with my family. Mention it on Monday. Say, hey, how's the camping trip, right? If you're remote, this is even more important because you still want to form those bonds with your coworkers, right? I really recommend just reaching out to people on Slack just to say hi, right? If it's been a while since you talked to someone, I will often reach out to people, especially maybe more junior members of my team, and say, hey, how's it going? And even put in parentheses like, I don't have anything to talk, right? I said, like, I have no agenda here. I just wanted to know how you're doing, right? And it's those little kind of impacts and those little moments with your coworkers that really build up into better, more fruitful relationships, right? This is going to make you work more effectively as a team. It's going to make your job more enjoyable, and it's also going to yield dividends later in the future, right? When you are looking for referrals for other jobs, because if you have a good working relationship with your coworkers, it's going to be a lot easier to get employed somewhere else when they refer you to work at their cool company, right? So just make an effort to check in with your coworkers to see how they're doing. Ask them about their kids, ask them about their spouse, ask them about their hobbies, things like that. Because it really, I do promise it'll yield dividends. I think that's a big mistake I see from people in this industry, right? Is they're just so concerned about the code. They're so concerned about just getting the thing done. Sometimes it stops to smell the roses, or it helps to stop and smell the roses just a little bit, right? And it helps these little moments, these things that you think wouldn't matter as much, actually do have an outsized impact, and they're very easy to do. So I encourage you just to check in with your coworkers, to form good relationship with them, to make your career more successful. And I think that is the last point.
It is. Thank you so much, Carter. I was like, have grasped onto every word, because these are things that I can apply. I'm not a software engineer, but these are things that I can apply to, and I think are so important, again, really to just being more successful just in general. And so thank you so much for that. Guys, we are open to take questions, really about anything. Like Carter said, if it's a question that you might have about HiCounselor, about the tips that he shared, how he, was able to put these into practice, maybe some things that you're struggling with, whatever. We're here for the next couple minutes, so feel free to drop in the chat any questions that you've got. We've got a follow-up question, really just about looking for jobs for a while now, and any references or resources maybe when it comes to applying to positions. And for those that are based in the States, HiCounselor is a really great option, and can help you with that networking, with the auto applications, and then I think networking is huge. You touched on that a little bit, and just having the door open there for those referrals. But anything else that you would like to add regarding that, Carter?
Well, no, I think you covered the most important one, which is that if you are either struggling with getting a job or looking to take your career to the next level, HiCounselor, that's what we're all about, right? I highly recommend it as a resource. I think if with jobs, it's it's fairly simple in that if you're not getting interviews, it's a resume problem, right? Which means your resume either isn't formatted correctly, or it's not highlighting your strengths, or your resume is weak. Maybe you haven't done a ton, right, to really make yourself stand out, right? If it's a formatting problem, well, that's easier, right? Again, if you're at HiCounselor, we offer resume formatting help. There are forums online, right, where you can post your resume and people will review it for you, things like that. That's one point. If it's an interview, if you are getting interviews but you're not getting the job, well, it's an interview problem, right? And so then you have to ask yourself, well, am I faltering in the technical questions, right? Is it the behavioral questions where maybe I'm not doing so hot, and then you have to improve? I mean, I can't diagnose the problem super specifically right here in a live stream, right? But if you were to come to HiCounselor, right, then that's exactly what we do, right? We do live interviews, we do interview preps, we do group sessions, we do resume reviews. I personally review resumes right here at HiCounselor. but then, the other thing I say is like, it's a numbers game, right? Sometimes I'll hear people say, I've been, applying to jobs and, I put in 30 applications and haven't heard anything. Like, that's nothing, guys, right? Like, sometimes I always tell people, especially if it's your first job, I say 500 applications. That's probably in the realm of what you're looking for, right? It also gets harder, if you restrict yourself, if you say, I'm only willing to work in Cleveland, Ohio, right? I'm like, well, I don't know how many people are hiring in Cleveland, Ohio, right? If you're saying I'm only going to accept remote work, right? That also limits you, right? Plenty of places do hire remote, and especially far more for considering pre-pandemic levels. But I don't know. I just open yourself up to as many opportunities as you can, right? If you're willing to relocate, that helps a ton. But yeah, I mean, that's just sort of general advice, but that's about as good I can do in a live stream.
Thanks, Carter. It is a live stream, but there will be a recording of it on our YouTube page and on LinkedIn. So if you missed the beginning or want to go back and look through these tips again and learn how to apply them into your daily life, feel free to check out the LinkedIn page or YouTube to see the recording. Okay, well, I've got some links that I would like to share. And if anyone has any last minute questions, again, still feel free to drop those. But I do have just a couple things to share with you all before we leave you for the day. So Carter and I would love to hear your feedback from today's session. So feel free to drop your feedback on the form that I have just shared. You are welcome to share any future sessions that you may like to see, but we love to hear that feedback. If you are interested in attending today's info session, I'm going to give you the link for that as well. So this will send you directly to the sign up for the info session for HiCounselor. You're going to be able to learn more about the things that we do, the way that the program works. You'll get to see some success stories. So make sure you tune in if you are looking for maybe that additional support and help when it comes to resumes, mock interviews, hitting that target number of applications, and maybe even getting those referrals, and definitely getting support with that networking, which is so important. If you are, maybe you've already attended a info session and you are already interested in applying, our upcoming cohort is starting on July 24th. So I've got the link for that. And then I did want to make you all aware of a virtual job fair that we've got coming up. And so that opportunity is going to be on July 27th. And we'll just drop the link in the chat again for you to sign up for if that is something that you are interested in. And then finally, you all are welcome to register for our live real world projects that are hosted through LinkedIn. So going to share that with you as well. Lots of things coming your way in the chat. And so let's see, we've got a couple questions. Well, we've got one more question that you hit on a little bit in terms of just kind of your step to get your foot in the door, but any last minute experience or advice that you have in terms of getting experience for landing a job for someone that is maybe a new graduate and doesn't quite have the experience needed yet?
Yeah, I always say when you're looking at jobs, right, and if you're new grad and you have no experience, right, you just got to ask yourself, well, how am I separating myself, make myself stand out from other candidates, right? And really that's anyone getting a job, right? Is how am I standing out from the other candidates, right? Particularly in your case, how am I standing out from other new grads, right? You have no experience. I mean, it's gonna be a little harder to stand out. I would recommend really focusing on taking a project that you've done, right? And really trying to sell it well in your resume, right? Focusing on, sort of what technologies you use and maybe especially if they're different than other people. But I would also recommend taking any sort of project you have or any project you're working on and start asking yourself, what's the next level for this project, right? What can I do that's going to make me competitive compared to other people, right? A lot of people have created an Android app, right? In school or something like that, right? How many people have those Android apps on the Play Store, right? Maybe that's something you could do, right? Even if it's something small, a little game or something like that, even just putting in your resume, published app to the Play Store, that's great. If it gets any users, that's fantastic, right? Even if it has 10 monthly active users, has more monthly active users than any of my apps on the Android Play Store, because I have no apps on the Android Play Store, right? So that's already something that would set you apart from me, right? You have a website, right? You made a website for school, right? You got it running locally. Are you able to get it running online, right? Are you able to follow an AWS tutorial and get your website up and running and live in production somewhere, and you can put the URL right in your resume and have someone go look at it, right? That's going to set you apart from someone else, right? If you already have it running online, have you monetized it? Have you put any ads on it, right? Something like that. Again, that's probably not going to make you any money, right? But that's something that a lot of new grads haven't done, right? That's just the question you got to ask yourself as a new grad is like, what am I doing that's making me stand out from other new grads, right? As a new grad, especially if you have a degree in computer science, the good news for you is that you already do stand out from a lot of other candidates, right? And that some candidates don't have a computer science degree, right? It's not the death knell. I don't have a computer science degree. My bachelor's is in business management, right? I've done just fine for myself. I am getting a master's in computer science because I feel like I missed out on some key contexts and some key fields that I'm trying to catch up on, and just be a better engineer. But if you are a new grad and you have a computer science degree, then you're already standing out from other grads, so that's good. But again, just keep asking yourself, what am I doing that's making myself stand out from other candidates? And take a look at your projects and say, what's the next level? And the answer is anything you wince at and say, oh, but that sounds really hard. Guess what? That's the thing that makes you stand out from other candidates, right? Because everyone else had that same exact thought. If you have the discipline and the drive to actually do the thing, again, to put it online, to push it to the Play Store, that's what shows the next level. That's what helps you stand out. And that's what's going to bring your attention, the hiring manager's attention to your resume.
Great. Thank you. Okay, guys. Well, thank you all so much. The last thing that I want to just encourage you to do before we head out for the afternoon is follow us on social media at HiCounselor 2022 on Instagram, and then obviously our LinkedIn. It's just a great way to stay engaged with what we've going on and to know about events that are coming up. Carter, thank you so much again for joining us and providing us with those tips that are truly just so easily implemented into our daily lives. Appreciate that so much. Any closing comments before we leave? Hey, Carter, are you with me?
I am. Yep.
Let's see. I think we're going to head out, but I was going to allow you to provide any closing comments before we head out.
I thought, for some reason, I thought you were talking to the audience.
Yeah.
No, as far as closing comments, no, I think, again, just another plug for HiCounselor. We really love what we do here. We love helping people get to that next level in their career. Keep on keeping on, guys. I think it's easy when you're a career or when you're starting out in your career to look at people who maybe have success that you want to think, well, they're probably just so great and they're probably so amazing. And I'm just not, I'm just a loser or whatever. And they're where they are because they're so much smarter than me. I guarantee you it's not true, right? If you made it this far in the software engineering career, you're probably a pretty smart guy or gal, right? And also the people who have made it to the levels maybe where you want to be have all faced career setbacks. They've all faced challenges and trials and felt inadequate, right? And so if you're feeling that way, right, you're not alone. And so, just keep on pushing forward, doing your best, right? And if you're looking for a little more structured guidance and a little more help, come join us at HiCounselor, right? Because that's exactly what we're going to offer you.
Perfect. Well, thank you all. Make sure to check out those links that were shared in the chat and leave your feedback for us. And we hope to see you next time. So thank you all.
Sounds great.